You ain't seen bad, but it's coming. Welcome to Hey Guys Podcast. I'm Rob, that's Liam, and this week we watched 1989's Next of Kin. Now, if you haven't heard of this film, let alone seen it, you would be forgiven. For a film that boasts a cast like Patrick Swayze, Liam Neeson, Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, and Ben Stiller, this film really rarely gets mentioned and is never shown on TV. But that being said, for all its faults, this is still a gem of a hidden movie. Patrick Swayze plays Truman Gates, a tough, no-nonsense Chicago cop. Oh, he's also a hillbilly from the hills of Kentucky. Truman's younger brother Gerald also lives in Chicago, and one night he becomes a cropper of the mob. Not willing to give up his truck, Gerald is slain by Joey, a high-ranking mob lieutenant. Bad move. It's now time for hillbilly justice, as the other brother, Briar, comes to town seeking revenge. This is hillbillies versus mobsters at its finest. Or I'm guessing the only hillbillies versus mobsters there is. Now, before we hear from Liam, just a few points from myself. Firstly, the mobsters. Well, all of Chicago seem to have a problem with hillbillies. Like they're an everyday thing. But Kentucky is not next door. It is close to 400 miles away and near a 6-hour drive. How many hillbilly problems are Chicago mobsters going to have? Secondly, how stupid is Adam Baldwin's Joey, to brag about killing the boss's son to the rest of the organization? In a public restaurant, though, I might add. I mean, braggy or not, that's just idiotic. And if you are that idiotic, how did you rise so high in the organization? But I digress. As of this film, I believe Bill Paxton has now become a Hey You Guys all-star, with the likes of Aliens, Terminator, Predator 2, Near Dark, and maybe some more I'm forgetting. But Liam, in all of those Bill Paxton films we've watched, has that poor bastard ever survived? I mean, Sean Bean gets a lot of mentions for his deaths, but Bill Paxton has to be up there, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah. He has to be up there. He dies in most films.
Yeah.
The only disappointment in this film is that he dies so early.
So quickly. Yeah, production stills have him with his brothers on like this.
Yeah.
And he doesn't see Briar. But have we done a film where he survives? I was racking my brain. I came up with one.
I was like, he survived in Twister, but we haven't done Twister.
No.
Oh, all right, go for it.
True Lies.
Oh, yeah.
He does survive in True Lies, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but even there, he probably would have been better off dying. Like, he suffered the ultimate indignity. Like, the way he goes out is such a bitch. So even when he doesn't die, he still goes out horribly in his own unique way. There's very few films where, like you said, you get to the end credits, and it's just Bill Paxton just having his moment in the sun. Does that ever fucking happen? I don't think so.
Another one that just shot to my mind, Titanic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a good point. Yeah, he does survive. It would be really weird if he died in Titanic, though. In 1997, it's like you go through the whole film, and maybe the only way it could maybe happen, because there was an alternative ending, wasn't there, with the stone of stoniness or whatever, where she throws it off the edge of the boat. Like if he tried to grab it and fell overboard, that'd be like the ultimate Bill Paxton move, I think.
You got the greatest love story apparently, and he fell into the propellers of the boat.
Oh yeah, that would be the best. Yeah, he doesn't just fall overboard, just so there's no doubt. You see him hit the propellers and just get cut to fucking shreds. That'd be the ultimate Bill Paxton move. But it's a bit of a shame, but that was a good point. Like the production spill, and just for those who don't, I'd never seen this film before, and until recently, I'd never even heard of this movie. And randomly, I don't even know where it came up, but I just came across Next of Kin, and I'm like, what the fuck? Look at this cast. Why have I never heard this film? And then randomly, like, we're going to this movie Next of Kin, which is unbelievable. But you look at the stills, of course, I'm doing the research, and you see Bill Paxton, you see him with Patrick Swayze and Liam Neeson, and all these stills, like, oh, awesome. You got these like 300 movie. Except they're never on screen together. Like Patrick Swayze and Bill Paxton are on screen together. What? Once? Twice?
No, just once. No, it's literally he's stocking up the cigarette machine.
That's it. Yeah. I was like, were they talking on the phone? They were doing that classic 80s, Beverly Hills Cop style, cigarette truck thing.
Yeah.
And then, he's just killed rather unceremoniously, I might add, which is a bit of a shame, but there's plenty of awesome cast to make up for it. Now, this film is one of the most, and you've already mentioned that this film has its problems. Like, we'll get those. This film definitely has its problems. It's fun. Like, it has like a certain, like, it's got what I would refer to as personality, which kind of drags you through. A combination of personality and great cast kind of gets you over the many bumps in the road that this movie provides. But this is still one of the most overqualified movies of all time. This is directed by John Irvin. This is the guy who directed, probably most famously other than this, Raw Deal. Like, he specializes in, right, and I don't mean this in a mean way, totally forgettable movies. Like, he hasn't got a kind of like key movie to his name. He's a kind of quintessential journeyman of a director. There's no real link, rhyme, or reason to his films. He's just done a bunch of films. They're all fine. None stand out. Much like this film. The thing that does make it stand out isn't the direction, isn't the script. No, it's the aforementioned cast. Usually when I think of like overqualified actors in movies, it's usually an actor. Like you get like famously Michael Caine in Jaws the Revenge, or like Jeremy Irons in Dungeons and Dragons. You know, somebody taking a paycheck. But to get this many top quality actors in, let's be clear, a bit of a C+ movie is pretty rare. I mean, Mars Attacks, you could make an argument for, but that was like Tim Burton coming off like a real hot streak. So like Mars Attacks would have been a big draw, despite the fact it's a bit of a whatever movie. The only thing I can compare it to, and don't get me wrong, this is a much better movie than that, was, do you remember a movie called Movie 43?
Unfortunately, yes, I do.
Yeah, where it feels like you've got a bunch of people who owe a director a favor. Now, if you've never heard of Movie 43, it's one of the worst comedies of all time. But, and this is only mentioning some of the names in this film, it has Chloe Grace Moretz, Hugh Jackman, Jeremy Allen White, Kate Winslet, Emma Stone, Chris Pratt, Naomi Watts, Jared Butler, Richard Gere, and a whole bunch more. And it's dog shit. And you're like, right, somehow the director has got dirt on all of these fucking people and he's calling in the favor.
You know who the director was of Movie 43?
Go for it.
Well, one of the three directors was Elizabeth Banks.
Elizabeth, come on. I mean, you can get that. Elizabeth Banks feels like somebody in Hollywood who would have a lot of famous friends. She seems likable. She seems like the kind of person you'd want to say yes to. You know, if Elizabeth Banks like, oh, I'm doing this like comedy, do you want to come and do it? You're like, Elizabeth Banks, she's got good pedigree. Why not? This film is not that. But like I said, this is a different beast. This is a run-of-the-mill action movie with a somewhat unique premise of, you already mentioned, the mobsters versus hillbillies subgenre, which, as far as I know, doesn't exist beyond that. But
I want more.
Me too. Me too. My top note is, why aren't there more hillbillies versus stuff in movies? You just don't get it.
I mean, the only one I could think of, hillbillies versus horror, when we had Tucker and Dale.
Which is a brilliant film, by the way. Every time we bring it up, I feel compelled to say, if you haven't seen Tucker and Dale versus Evil, go and see it immediately. Stop listening to this podcast. Go and see that movie. It's the best.
Aside from Tucker and Dale, can you name another hillbilly? Actually, not Tucker and Dale, because that was the genre of horror. Another hillbilly film that's not set as a horror film. I mean, Deliverance, you can argue that that's horror. Thriller horror.
I think that's horror. Yeah.
You've got like the Wrong Turn films.
Yeah. Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So,
well, they're usually almost like it's a setting, isn't it? It's like, oh, you're out of your elements. You're in with the hillbillies. They're all a bit backwards. But this isn't that. They treat it, and it's one of the things. Like one of the biggest issues of this film is that it's narratively, tonally, and even thematically messy. And you get hints of the film. I think it wants to be, but maybe it's got like too many plates spinning. But you can see by the end they're trying to kind of have this, this almost comparison between, all right, this is the mob and these are hillbillies, but they have these rules that they live by. These kind of like, we're family first. They're just coming at it from different directions. And I thought that was cool. Like Liam Neeson, who thought a giant Northern Irishman would do more for hillbillies than I think maybe any other actor. Like by time, because of course there's the danger at the start when you see them up in the Appalachian Mountains and they're all like giving Helen Hunt the side eye, like, oh, these like the backwoods hillbillies. And they are to an extent, they're certainly different. But Liam Neeson is super likable in this film as a hillbilly. Super likable. To the point where you're just like, by the end, you are treating him in the kind of like that even pegging. It's not like, oh, the evil backwards hillbillies. It's sort of like, well, these are mobsters. These are hillbillies. They have their differences, but fundamentally they live by surprisingly similar family codes. And that's what's leading to the feud.
Do you know what I was hoping for? Do you know when they were driving in the truck? Liam, Briar, Truman, and Jesse, they would drive, and you had the music, the hymn playing.
Yeah.
I was hoping that was his actual radio, and it didn't then link to them singing over Bill Paxton's coffin, because that is so uncomfortable. You've just met your brother-in-law and he's just got it turned up so loud, like some sort of like gospel music playing.
You get it in certain places. Like I believe it. Like, firstly, I was a little bit jealous because he's driving a pickup truck, and I really want a pickup truck. And suddenly,
same snap. Yeah, I've always
pickup
wanted
trucks. I'm not sure if it's the same in Cardiff, but all of a sudden in Edinburgh, there are pickup trucks fucking everywhere. Like, all of a sudden, they must be just readily available, because I never used to see pickup trucks, or if I did, it used to be like, oh, dude, there's a pickup truck. I really want one of those. Now I see them fucking everywhere. But Bethan always asks me, it's always the same question: what would you be hauling?
Yes, like, I've had that question. People have asked me, what would you be hauling? Well, my shopping from Lidl, for a start.
Well, the answer could be a dead relative, because in the back of this, they haul Bill Paxton's coffin all the way back to the Appalachian Mountains. So I'm like, listen, you can't do that in a Ford Fiesta. Jesus Christ, if you're stuck in that kind of situation. But to bring it back to the music, I think I mentioned before, when we went to the Faroe Islands, and I'm not comparing, the good folk of the Faroe Islands to hillbillies, but when I was driving around on a Sunday, I was like, I'm trying to change the channel. It is nothing but gospel music. You can't get any other channel. They are just that level of religious, where Sunday morning is gospel music time. So every radio station, you're just getting Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. So I get the idea if they're driving down to a very religious part of the country, that on a Sunday morning, for instance, you would get nothing but the Jesus tunes.
Yeah.
But we do have to bring it back to, if you're talking about the music in this film, the use of music, did you find it, I don't know, for lack of a better term, absolutely bonkers sometimes? Because you would have like this action sequence and then this South Park-esque music interlude, which was so on the nose. Like, I think it was right after Patrick Swayze and Briar got into a fight. And then it's just like out of nowhere, they're like, brothers, they got into a fight, but now they're friends again. It's just like, Jesus, is this fucking happening? It just comes out of nowhere and disappears as soon as it shows up. And then that same bullshit song pops up in the credits as well.
It's fuck off, because that was on my notes. I love that song.
I have a lot of time for that song. But for it to be dropped into the middle of the film, where it's just like, in case you didn't get what just happened, these two brothers had a fight. They just kind of explained it again, but in music form.
If you also wanted to drop, like, just hit the nail on the head, the song was actually called Brother to Brother as well, just because.
Yeah. They might as well have called it Brother to Brother handcuffed in a bar having a fight, which, let's be clear, was a fantastic fight scene.
Oh, it was a good fight. That's
my issue with this film. I'm not ever convinced that it knows what it wants to be. Like, when I started watching it, I was like, oh, this is going to be like a Chicago-style neo-noir thriller. It had all the rain coming down. And then there's this really, I'm not sure if it's a really clumsy transition or this awesome transition, I haven't quite made up my mind, between the rainy streets of Chicago to the Kentucky Appalachian Mountains, and the music changes, suddenly it's sunshine. I'm like, oh, well, they're trying to do this kind of like, oh, well, in Chicago, it's like the big city, and then you're in like, the backwaters of the Appalachian Mountains. But then that's all kind of abandoned for a bit of a kind of whatever 80s action movie. And I say an action movie, but there's not actually a lot of action. So I'm like, okay, is this maybe a bit more of a thriller with like a bit of action interspersed? But then during the finale, I'm jumping to the end of the film, but during the finale, then in the cemetery, it goes absolutely insane. And suddenly Patrick Swayze goes full Patrick Swayze with spinning kicks. He's shooting arrows. There are people making fucking monkey sounds. It goes absolutely bananas. But there's been nothing in the build-up to justify it whatsoever.
No, because I had that written down. I actually also mentioned it as well when I was helping a friend move yesterday. And he's talking about the film. He said, was it as good as you remember? I said, well, I remember it being action-packed. And like, not a lot happens until the end, when all of a sudden, I'm guessing Truman Gates, Patrick Swayze, has shown up beforehand and placed a load of bow and arrows and crossbows around, because he's shooting bow and arrows, and all of a sudden he puts that down to get a crossbow.
Well, he's in case you didn't notice, and he mentions it 72 times in the first 10 minutes of this movie. He's just a country boy, Rob. He's just a country boy who has bow and arrows. I was like, yeah, I get it, which led to one of the weirdest almost sex scenes I've ever seen, where it's like one of the first sequences with him and Helen Hunt, and he clearly wants to have sex with her, while also the film wants to remind you that he's a country boy. So he's kind of playing a violin, making some weird noises. He says again 3 times in that sequence, as far as I can remember, I'm just a country boy. I'm like, is he going to like, I don't know what was going to happen in the bedroom, but it was going to be weird country sex. That's for damn sure. But I feel like they were reminding you constantly, because Patrick Swayze just can't do a Southern accent, which is weird as shit because he's from Texas. He just sounds like Patrick Swayze, where obviously Liam Neeson has to make the effort. He can't come in and sound all Northern Irish.
It'd be Sean Connery, wouldn't it? Sean Connery playing.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Sean Connery just doing his weird non-Scottish Sean Connery accent, but I'm from Kentucky. But Liam Neeson's going for it. But Patrick Swayze, I'm just like, I don't know where his fucking character's from at all.
Did you as well? I did they hire him just to be the hillbilly whisperer? Like,
yeah, maybe.
The guy at the beginning of the film, Ted Levine. Now, we've seen Ted Levine in loads of stuff. Top of my head, his voice is famous. He was the voice of Rusty Nail in like Joyride or Roadkill, wherever you are in the world. He's the police chief in Monk, probably more recognizable this day and age. He was also the police chief in Fast and Furious, Paul Walker's boss in the first one.
Yeah.
But he's a hillbilly as well. He's gone a bit insane. Apparently, they're in a hillbilly hotel. They're not going into the hotel until they call the hillbilly whisperer.
Yeah.
So he comes in, talks him down, and then that guy goes absolutely insane for no reason and just beats shit out of Ted Levine after he's handcuffed. And Truman just go, was he only? Why did he become a cop? Was it just? This is what I can't get my head around. A hillbilly's a big problem in Chicago.
That is the weirdest thing in this film. They really posit the idea that hillbillies are an issue in Chicago. Now, I don't live in Chicago, but I mean, I've seen a whole bunch of films set in Chicago. I've never heard hillbillies reference, and it's an interesting premise, as we already said. I like the idea of that kind of the similarities and the differences between the mob and the hillbillies. But this is set in an apparently fictional version of Chicago where hillbillies are a problem to the point where they're, oh, excuse me, I've got a hiccup. We're going to have to hire a hillbilly to deal with all these motherfucking hillbillies.
I argue as well. Like I've said, it's a near 6-hour drive, right? It's 400 miles. How long does it take you to drive from Edinburgh to Cardiff?
About 6-7 hours, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like me saying I got a problem with these fucking Scots on a daily basis.
Yeah. It's a really strange one, and it's never true. It's just basically trying to justify the existence of Patrick Swayze's character in the Chicago police force. And setting up this kind of conflict. Again, it's one of the themes which, again, theoretically is interesting. Like, he's gone to the big city. I think they would have done a better job. And it's another one of the narrative threads which falls by the wayside, is the one between Patrick Swayze and Helen Hunt. That should have been a stronger narrative thread, because if you're like, oh, well, he's here because of Helen Hunt, because he loves her, then he's moved to Chicago for her, and now he's become a cop. Then he's got this conflict between her and his family and his new values and his old values, all that stuff. But it's never really, that story never really comes to fruition. If anything, Helen Hunt, as good as she is, she just kind of disappears for half of the film. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, do we want to make this about the mobsters, or do we want to make this about his relationship with his brother? And instead, it tries to do all three and basically ends up doing none of them with any great conviction. So that's when you end up with something of a messy film. And I think, to bring it back to your point earlier, where you have these memories of this being this action-packed film, there's too much narrative for there to be the action set pieces required for this to be considered a quote-unquote fun 80s action film. And I think that's one of the reasons it's maybe fallen by the wayside. Nobody talks about it. It's a decent enough movie, but it doesn't have those kind of like genuinely quintessential, memorable 80s moments.
Yeah.
This was made the same year as Roadhouse. I'm not saying Roadhouse is a much better movie than this, but Roadhouse is memorable as fuck for like a handful of scenes. This film is lacking those.
What? As well, right? You said about narrative. What is the mobster's business?
Oh, fucking God knows. I was really hoping you had the answers to this as somebody had seen this film. I was like...
I'm guessing at the beginning, like, they pull Gerald over to steal the truck for what's inside the truck. I think that's an insurance scam.
There's nothing in the truck, though.
But they were meant to pick something up from the diner, weren't they?
I will bow to your superior knowledge.
So I'm assuming it's an insurance scam. Yeah. But when you go to their headquarters,
their restaurant / arcade headquarters. Yeah, got you. Yeah.
It's an arcade.
Dude, they've got so many arcade. They've got dope ass arcade machines, pinball machines. They've got one of those old school bubble hockey machines. There's so much. You got Papa John, big Papa John, making the ragu in the other room.
Yeah.
And all I'm thinking is,
Making the ragu.
What the fuck are they doing here? What is the business?
You know where else they got in there?
What else?
White Chinese takeout containers.
Yes, this is going to become an ongoing thing on the Hey You Guys podcast. Those who didn't listen last week, one of the big things we brought up, which Dave cut a very specific vocal. What was it? What did I scream at? Supposedly, can't they just fucking make them white? I was like, oh, that doesn't sound good without context. But basically, the idea is when you watch 80s American movies specifically, whenever they eat Chinese, they come in these awesome white Chinese boxes. And when I was growing up, the one that always stood out for me was Ghostbusters. And obviously, we had it again last week. And then after we discussed it last week, it suddenly shows up at Papa John's place. They're all having Chinese food for some reason, come in the white boxes. And after I watched this, obviously the TV's listening to me moaning to you about Michael Douglas. As soon as this film finished, it said, you might enjoy the game starring Michael Douglas. And I was like, you know what, Amazon? I think you're right. I might enjoy the game with Michael Douglas. I started watching that within 20 minutes, white Chinese boxes. Fucking crazy now. I can't escape.
I sent you a picture on the weekend as well, because I went to a local wrestling show. I took my son. And as I'm buying a drink in the the hole in the wall where they're selling the cans of beer, in the background, one of the wrestlers is eating Chinese food and noodles in an orange box. I'm like, no, that doesn't work for me. I need
it just needs to be white. I don't know.
I need it white. Yeah.
Why is that so much more aesthetically pleasing? Just a clear white. Like you said, maybe there's a print on the front. I feel they need to go back, any excuse to go back and rewatch Big Trouble in Little China. But surely they have white Chinese takeaway boxes in that film. They have to. This can't just be us. Other people have to be noticing this. This has to be a thing.
Speaking to that scene as well, right? Which you have Ben Stiller prominent. I keep mentioning Ben Stiller because Ben Stiller is random. I wish we could find a way to watch horrible. Highway to Hell. Because when Ben Stiller's in Highway to Hell, I'll talk about that another time. But he is the most Jewish Italian I have ever seen. Like, he is not Italian, is he?
No, he's not. Like, he does look quite Jewish. There's no getting around it. And that's not a criticism, just a factual thing. And it does lead to, like, as great as this cast is, he's the one that stands out as in, oh, this is an amazing cast. And then you're like, Ben Stiller. And then as you watch the film, you're like, Ben Stiller, yeah. He is sadly horrendously miscast in this film. Horrendously miscast. And again, I don't want to keep using the term narrative thread, a narrative thread which maybe didn't need to exist. It's just like they could have made something much more straightforward to have the whole Papa John versus Joey. It is Joey, isn't it? Adam Baldwin's character.
Yeah.
They could have had something much more straightforward. Again, I know they're trying to mirror the whole family aspect. Or maybe I'm just having the issue that they should have cast anyone else other than Ben Stiller, but he's just not convincing in this film whatsoever. He's the one part of this film where I'm just, I have issues with this film, but fundamentally I enjoyed it. And I love the cast back to front, other than Ben Stiller, sadly.
Do you recognize Papa John as well?
Yes, I did. Sorry, I'm going to cough. I'm going to mute. What's that?
No problems. So I'll tell you anyway. So Papa John is the one-armed man, isn't he, from The Fugitive?
He is the one-armed man. Thank you very much for covering that.
No problems. But you're right. Ben Stiller's like, and also that I'll say it for you, that narrative thread of this is my first son from my first marriage. It's like all of a sudden, this dude just popped up into my life, show him the ropes because he's family. Yeah. He was really affected about, and what a way to go. Like, you don't see it. You just see his burnt corpse under a tarp.
Yeah.
And then Joey, why are you admitting to people in the fucking business that you have like murdered whilst you're eating tomato sauce or ragu or whatever it is?
There are two particularly odd sequences in this film. One of them is they make a big deal of having the guy like, oh, we're going to set up the recording device so you can listen in on Joey talk. And then subsequently immediately go to a scene where you have no need for that whatsoever. He is openly and very loudly admitting to how he killed, Lawrence, and how he did it. It's so moronic. it's like the really idiotic version of the sandwich scene, which is one of my favorite sequences of any film I've seen in the last 20 years, where, you always forget about this, and they often forget about in the movie. You've got a hillbilly death squad. We're about to travel the Appalachian Mountains north towards Chicago to fight with the mobsters. We've got our guns. What else do we need? Fuck. We're going to be starving. We need sandwiches. So they have whole sequences where the wives are making sandwiches for
Sandwiches and flasks, or as Americans call them, I think thermoses. They're doing all that up, and then nobody will ride with the snake guy. Why is the snake guy taking his snakes on a 6-hour drive?
Well, you've got to have the incredibly overly complicated trap of the snake pit. Again, the ending is a completely different
Why would
movie.
that guy run onto a bus he doesn't know about? What's he doing?
If you told me an hour into this film that one of the mobsters was going to die by running onto a bus filled with snakes that was literally had snake pit written on the side, I would tell you to go fuck yourself, because I wouldn't believe you. It's from a different goddamn movie. I don't know. I don't know why the snake guy is even there, but then I also don't know why. And he's like the 80s lovable weirdo.
Michael J. Pollard.
Michael J.
Yes.
Pollard. Why, right? One, I get why he's in the film. It's like, all right, let's get Michael J. Pollard. He'll add a bit of chutzpah, whatever. He's always memorable to a guy who just owns the hotel or the flop house, whatever you want to call it. Why, by the end of the film, is he so involved? Why is he so involved? All right, fair play. He called the guys at Briar's request, but he's just phoning up and saying, listen, I work at the flop house. Briar said, if I don't come back, I'm to call this number. They come to town. All of a sudden, he's best friends with the snake guy. He's heavily involved in the finale of this film. Why? Why the fuck?
He implicated himself in a crime because he hid all of Briar's guns.
Mm-hmm.
So he broke into Briar's room, took all his guns before the mobsters could, and hid them. All that was left was that shotgun.
Yeah, some weird like right, and maybe you have the answer to this. Why the red paint in Helen Hunt's face?
I had that question. What was the point of that? Like, to just why don't you just threaten her? Just the red paint has no signification. It's not like,
no, was it just to, like, I guess the idea is he was supposed to let him know that
he can get to your wife. Yeah. Okay.
But the whole thing about him throwing it in her face, and she seems especially upset, it's in my eyes, blah, blah, blah. And again, this comes to a point where Helen Hunt, you've almost forgot that she's in the movie because she's just been missing, like MIA in this film for like 60 minutes. And then suddenly she just gets a tube of red paint thrown in her face.
I had that different in my head because it's been a while since I've seen this film. To me, I knew that scene happened, but to me, that was acid.
Oh, see, you're remembering this as this action-packed movie.
Yeah,
it's like it's not even like very thick. It didn't look like paint. It looked like ketchup.
By the time she got to the phone call, most of it was gone off her face anyway.
Yeah, she's like, oh, she threw ketchup in my face. I was like, oh, that's a massive inconvenience. That's about it. That's about it. And right, one last question, just because we're doing the silly why questions.
I want to go back as well, so don't worry, I got one as well.
Right, when they're looking for David Jenkins, I think it is, the guy who was with Bill Paxton's character at the start of the film in the truck, they go to the projects, and it is the projects, they say the projects, they make it clear, blah, blah, blah. And they go to a bar, and they're like, all right, we're looking for David Jenkins, and then suddenly the bar turns on him because Briar gets a little bit kind of restless, pulls a gun or whatever. Everyone, like the girl behind the bar, she pulls a shotgun. Someone else got an Uzi. It's the 80s. Of course they got an Uzi. One dude in the background, he's got nunchucks. He's got fucking nunchucks. Like everyone else brings a gun. It's like, fuck, I only brought my nunchucks. I was like, somebody was going to the prop department and was just like, give him nunchucks. Like, dude, everyone else has got a gun. Well, you're getting nunchucks, so you better can make the most of it. Very odd choice.
That dude was Bruce Leroy.
yeah. And maybe they just seen Bruce Leroy on screen. So strange.
So my question, going back, you said about he was the family lawyer. Was his name Frank or Fred or whatever his name was?
He was actually quite good in this film. Yeah, not enough to do, but he was good.
The family lawyer, who I recognize from, he was the Reverend in the Kevin Dillon remake of The Blob from 1988.
Ah, there you go. That's a deep cut.
He was also an alderman in The Untouchables, but I'm going with The Blob. So he gives the recording voice to that guy saying, though he likes to brag, I want to hear it. So I'm sat at the table with those two guys, let alone I'm in public, okay? And I'm telling those two guys about how I killed Lawrence and his face, and I'm telling these little jokes.
Mhm.
If that guy laughs the way he did, I
Yeah.
know he's undercover.
Oh
I
yeah,
know
that guy
for a
is
fact.
100% wearing a Y if you hear that
Yeah.
laugh. I could be talking about anything. I could be talking about going to the shopping. If you say, like, wait a minute, are you fucking bugged? Like, what's going on here? What are you? This is entrapment, sir. This is entrapment. Yeah, well,
The way that dude acted, it was ridiculous.
and just
That's
when
not
you
right.
think there can't be anything stranger in this film, and maybe this isn't weird, maybe this is a normal thing, but of all the things, I just wasn't expecting to see it. You suddenly get Colton taking his car, and we'll get to his car in a moment because it's fucking awesome. Turns right in the middle of Chicago in 1989. Where does he pull up to? Aldi. He just pulls up to Aldi.
Who the fuck's Colton?
Oh no, not Colton. What's his name?
Truman.
Yeah.
Patrick Swayze.
Yeah.
So you confused me then because you said somebody's car, and I'm like, who the fuck was Colton?
What's his name? Sorry,
Truman Gates.
Truman Gates. Where did I get Colton from? Where the fuck did I get that from?
Michael Douglas. Was he?
I think maybe I'm just confusing it with last week's podcast.
He was Jack Colton or something, wasn't he? Last week?
It was Jack Colton. Yeah. I'm just mixing up the two films. My apologies. Good.
No, but his car was these. But he pulled them to an Aldi, and that's always shocked me. But sorry, I've never known America to have a Lidl and an Aldi, but they do.
Well, yeah, but for like 25 years. Wait, what am I talking about? 35 years.
35 years, yeah.
Jesus Christ. But yeah, the car, like, this is low-key one of the coolest cars. But I think it's just because it's a Liam car. We already mentioned the fact that we both want a pickup truck. Make no mistake, if I can't get the pickup truck, I will settle for a 1987 Chevrolet Camaro RS. That car is so fucking cool. Like, there's just something about those cars where just like, they're both timeless and very timely, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They'll just look cool forever, but they are so late 80s. But love that car.
I love it as well.
Shame that he doesn't have the outfit to back it up, and I can't explain why. Because individually, I feel like that outfit on Patrick Swayze in 1989 should be cool as fuck, but there's something about the hat or something where I'm just like, it doesn't come together. It's less than the sum of his parts, and somehow he doesn't look cool, despite the fact that he really should look cool.
For me, it's the red leather jacket. It just doesn't work for him. What I liked about the car as well, that it wasn't traditionally kitted out. When you got the renegade cop hero or something, there's something about their cars, isn't there? There's always a trick. I mean, look at fucking Cobra with his car. Yeah. So I like the fact it was just a normal.
You say that though. Could this film maybe have done with a bit of that? Because I think you've either got to go one way or another.
He needed to be more of a renegade.
Well, I think you either go harder on the story and make this truly a story, like an interesting family story of hillbillies versus the mob. And I think they do maybe lean more that way. But then they suddenly remember they're making a film in 1989 and somebody's doing a line of cocaine. They're like, wait, whoa, bro, we need more fucking, what's the point of having all these hillbillies if we haven't got any crossbows and nobody's making monkey sounds? And get some fucking stakes in this film. You know, there's a little bit of that as well. And to me, I would like to see the batshit version. I would like to see the Cobra version of this movie where he's got a kitted out car, where he doesn't need to get the crossbows from everyone else. He just, I don't know, carries around a crossbow for some fucking reason. And Liam Neeson's character is a bit of a head case rather than just being like, that seems a bit harsh because my favorite thing about this film, without question, is Liam Neeson. Yeah. Liam is fantastic in this film. To the point where I would say there's like a good 30, 40-minute spell where this just becomes Liam Neeson's film. And it's, dare I say, a better film because he gets all the best action set pieces. He gets the awesome scene at Papa Joey's bizarre arcade restaurant business. And then the sequence where he's riding on top of the train, that's just fucking Liam Neeson sitting on top of a train.
Sitting on top of a train, yes.
Because we've talked about it a whole bunch of times. Like, you used to be able to get away with it in the 80s with, like, you know, standard def shit. And suddenly you go back, you watch these films in high def, and you're like, well, fuck, there's the stuntman. You can see it as clear as day. I was watching this, I was like, this is either really good camera work or that's just fucking Liam Neeson jumping onto a train. And then you have a sequence, as if to prove the point, where Liam Neeson is just sitting on top of a train, a moving train in Chicago. It's just like, that's badass. And he's got like the shotgun under the coat, like fucking Kyle Reese. He's got a revolver in the other hand. He's got the cap. I'm like, this is the coolest fucking hillbilly. And I'm going on record to say this. He's the best cinematic hillbilly of all. Like, he's just such a badass. When he's like holding them all down and then as a gamer, it breaks my heart a little bit to see him just shoot up arcade machines and classic pinball machines. But it's pretty fucking badass.
Yeah, I love that sequence as well, right? But not the same reason as you. When when they're all eating the Chinese food and they go, "Shall I take some food
In
to
the white
Joey?"
boxes.
Yeah. And he said, "Shall I take some food to Joey?" And they go, "You don't want to go up there." He. Like they're all just kids there because they know what's going on upstairs. And then the lights go out. Joey comes down. How do we make Adam Baldwin more Italian, should we say? Because let's give him the Italian wife beater vest. Okay,
Got to have
fine.
the white tucked into the trousers, which is what really makes it.
Why is it tucked in if he's upstairs with a hooker? Right?
Yeah, he was only halfway down to business.
So he comes down and the guy's on the floor, and then the hooker comes down and does what usually films tell me hookers don't do. Call the police.
Oh yeah, she actively involves herself in a shootout. Actively. She's like, "Hey, what the fuck is going on? I've called the cops. I've called my friends. I put this on Twitter. Fuck all you guys. Fucking Joey with your fucking vest tucked in. Like, why is this hooker involving herself? Why, when she heard, I don't know, all that gunfire, she's like, I'm getting the fuck out of Dodge. She's like, no. I'm gonna have like a moment with these guys. It's really strange.
I'm sure the hillbilly's not going to shoot me, so it's fine.
I've called it. It's basically, again, he's painting himself into a corner. It's just like, well, we need Liam to get out of here, but we also need all these guys to survive for the big showdown at the end, despite the fact that he's got them dead to rights. What do we need? We need the cops. How do the cops know? The hooker told them. Come on, guys. And again, there's a few strange choices. Like at the end, when Joey has Big Liam like dead to rights, he shoots him, but then he kind of like half shoots him, and then he misses a point blank shot. And you're like, oh, well, this is because they need Briar to survive for the big showdown. But then Briar dies anyway. It's like, why does that sequence need to be so clumsy? It's really odd. And it's one of the things, like, the action sequences just don't really land. And the finale, which we've mentioned a few times, it's fun, but it's not brilliant. It's really dumb. It almost feels like
moments.
Yeah, it feels like the sequence with the train is almost like it was directed by someone else. It's a really brilliant action set piece in an otherwise kind of so-so movie, I think.
You've called it a few times. You've called Liam Neeson a few times Big Liam, right? That flows effortlessly off your tongue better than I could say effortlessly. Do you stand in the mirror and call yourself Big Liam by any chance?
I mean, if I went for, and Bethany does say sometimes, I have this, which Big Liam obviously also has, is this ability to put on a cap and immediately go from Northern Irishman to hillbilly. Now, if I put on a cap, and I own a lot of caps, and I was wearing one yesterday, Bethany says there's something about me and caps that as soon as I put one on, I look like a hillbilly. And I think it's because of the shape of my head. If I wear a cap, I've got to wear one with like the big brim at the front, so it almost looks like a kind of a trucker cap almost, regardless of whether it has the meshing on the back. So I just have this look where as soon as I put a cap on, I'm like, I just look like a fucking hillbilly. So maybe even if I don't say it out loud, I'm like, Big Liam. Big Liam. Who doesn't love fucking Liam Neeson? And yeah, as I said, for all as brilliant as the cast is, Bill Paxton doesn't have enough to do. Helen Hunt disappears for half the film. Ben Stiller's not fantastic. And Patrick Swayze, despite the fact that he's from Texas, has an absolutely bonkers accent. And as I said, he's never quite as cool. Like, he needed to go full Cobra. I think you were right. It's certainly in terms of the aesthetic, and it never quite works. It just leaves the MVP undoubtedly to be Briar, to be Liam Neeson. And it's a shame that he gets killed off before the finale, because I would have liked him to see him fight alongside his hillbilly brothers at the end. So, and I felt like they left the door open. They were having the shootout. He kind of clipped him. I thought he was going to be injured, but then he was going to come back. And it's like, no, he's just dead. It's like, fuck.
He was dead. Briar was dead, was he?
Yeah, Briar was dead.
See, I always thought he was injured and he was just in the hospital.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I get the funny feeling that maybe they shot it in a way to leave it open, like they hadn't decided. And they go out of their way. You know, at the start of the film, he keeps telling you, I'm a country boy. I'm a mountain boy. Yeah, we get it. And then in that final sequence, it feels like he says like 4 times, you killed my brothers. I'm the only one left. It's like, yeah, we know they're dead.
Yeah, I did. So
it's quite confusing.
This is why I questioned that, because I always thought he was just injured. But then you had, was it Joey going 2 down, 1 to go?
Yeah. There's just constant narrative, like, audible nods to the fact that, no. Briar's definitely dead. Don't expect him to come back. He's dead. This is the only brother left. Blah, 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 blah.
I love that as well, right? Sorry, before we move on, just thinking about the hillbillies, and I loved it when you meet them and you're they're at the train station, and if you didn't know they were hillbillies, that introduction nails it. First thing he goes, "I'll go over. They don't like strangers, but I'm your wife." No, 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 not talking about you, honey. So he walks over, and he go, "Oh, are they hillbillies? Are they hillbillies?" Oh, yes, they are. When I go, cousin Jed, Grumpy Bill. Like, fucking hell, dude.
Cousin Mordecai.
Yeah.
Second cousin Jezebella.
That was the longest introduction ever. They're all shaking hands. They're all like highlighting a name. It's like when there's 5 people in the room, you go, Dave, Rob, Liam, Steve. Like,
yeah, well, that's the thing. As far as they go with the kind of like, Italian mobster stereotypes, where Papa John's making the fucking pasta and Joey's upstairs having sex with his vest tucked in. They do just as much with the hillbillies. Like, we get it, the hillbillies. No. We're going to have all the names. They're all going to sit around. There's going to be no technology. Helen Hunt's going to feel really ill at ease, where everybody just stands up like I've never seen anybody wear a dress before. You know, any of that shit. It's, they really do go heavy on the stereotypes. Yeah. However, it is kind of fun. And that is the heart of this movie. And one of the reasons, beyond the aforementioned cast, that this movie stands out, because it is that interesting battle between hillbillies and mobsters. And I think that's what ultimately makes the movie stand out.
Yeah, totally agree.
What was I going to say? I did have a few other things I wanted to mention.
While you're looking for them, man, can I mention one last thing?
Well, just two things with the cast. It was just... Is Adam Baldwin, because you mentioned him, because I was going to mention Helen Hunt, she disappears. I was like, she is a classically handsome woman. Just because we mentioned Kathleen Turner, I think she kind of falls into the same category as handsome woman. But Adam Baldwin, is he secretly the second best Baldwin, who just never quite got the breaks? Like, he's never had the big... Obviously, he gets additional kudos for being in Firefly and Serenity. But I was just like, I feel like he should have had a bigger career, because I think he's on screen at least, he's the second most compelling Baldwin, I think.
He's not a Baldwin brother, though, don't you? I think we've mentioned this before.
Yeah, I know he's not officially, but he just looks I think people throw him in as like that, the kind of like the 6th or 7th Baldwin brother.
Because he's still doing things. I mean, you look at Stephen Baldwin. When's the last time you saw Stephen Baldwin? The only thing that comes to my mind are 2 films for Stephen Baldwin: Biodome.
Yeah, and Fled. Was he in Fled, or was that the other one?
Fled. That didn't come to my mind. So 3 things now. I love Fled. I thought Fled was great. No, the other one is a random Drop Zone ripoff where he plays an undercover cop and Tom Berenger plays the Gary Busey part. Straight to DVD.
Yeah, but wasn't he in Usual Suspects?
Fuck me, 4 things.
I was going to say, you can't, like, come on, man, that would be top of the list. I was like, he does play a pretty big part in Usual Suspects. Yeah. I love the fact that Fled is a completely okay, like, mid-90s action film, but it is home to the fight. We've mentioned a bunch of times on this podcast, we love it when they get the title of the film into the movie. So it's like, welcome to Con Air. I'm going to take his face off. I just keep bringing up Nicolas Cage movies. Lawrence Fishburne actually says in the movie Fled, "We have got to fled."
Come on, convict, we have to fled.
That's it. Come on, convict, we've got to fled, or we've got whatever. Needless to say, it makes fucking zero sense. They were just so adamant, we are getting this bullshit title into the movie. It makes no sense, but I love that.
Yeah, no, he was it was a made-for-TV movie called Cutaway, which and then
trust you to have that ahead of the Usual Suspects, you son of a bitch.
So I don't know why I randomly remember it, but you had Tom Berenger playing the Gary Busey part. You had Stephen Baldwin playing the Denzel Washington, Wesley Snipes part, and then just to throw it in, you also had Dennis Rodman in there as a skydiver as well.
Fantastic. If ever there was a 90s film you've just described, that's fucking it. Unreal. Right, anything else to add?
What was there anything else I wanted to add?
Oh, well, I had to mention Rhino and Tony becoming famously shots at the end of the film. Like, all they hear is one of the hillbillies make like one noise, and suddenly they just start shooting into the trees like they're fighting against the predator. I'm like, what are you two fucking morons shooting? And for the most part, this film's pretty po-faced. We mentioned the fact that it probably needed a bit more fun. Other than, I'm going to call him Cousin Leo. I'm not sure if he's just Leo, who's just randomly like the kind of comedy sidekick.
Yeah, the one who gets on the train and goes, "I'm so sorry," as he holds the keys.
He has a bunch of sequences where he's playing it broadly for laughs in a movie which doesn't feel like it needs that or deserves it. It's very strange, Leo's character in this film.
One of my hates, you've mentioned this, I'll bring it up. I already added in my hates. It really impacted me when they're in the cemetery at the end, and you've just mentioned them. Who's it? Rhino and Paulie.
Yeah. Tony.
Sorry, Rhino and Tony. And they shoot into the sky.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like they like you said, it's like they're fighting against the predator. They hear a noise and they start shooting. I'm like, why are you shooting up? What the fuck are you shooting at? You absolute psychos.
It reminded me of another Bill Paxton film we did, Predator 2, when El Scorpio starts shooting into the air as well. And I know you just said it's like they're fighting the Predator, but this is when he's fighting Danny Glover's cop.
Yeah. At that point, he has he's not aware that the Predator exists. He's just shooting into the sky. But he's doing it somewhat stylistically, I'd say. He's making a bit of a statement. These guys aren't making a statement. They're just like, oh, there's trouble. Shoot into the air. Like they're trying. It's like they're very literally trying to hit something. I'm just like, what are you trying to kill? Birds? What the fuck?
The other thing of trying to hit somebody, and Predator again, you got Joey using the Predator's Adrian Brody barreled shotgun. And he's doing that like from sniper distance. Like, what the fuck are you trying to hit, mate?
Yes, I don't know. This is a strange film. Just to be clear, I enjoyed this film. It's a strange film. And I have to ask the question before we move on. Is Patrick Swayze good in this film? You know, like, right, just be clear, and this might seem sacrilegious now, but he was put up for the Razzie Award twice in 1989, once for this and once for Roadhouse. Now, of course, we've all come to love Roadhouse retrospectively. He actually ended up losing out to William Shatner for Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, which is the correct answer because that is the worst Star Trek film. I don't care what anyone says. It's horrendous. I think that a Razzie Award is a little bit harsh for both this and Roadhouse, but also, like I said, I think, Liam Neeson rolls in and steals the film from underneath him. I'm just not convinced he's quite as compelling as he should be.
No, I mean, he's coming off a rough little run, isn't he? So he did Dirty Dancing in 87. Big hit, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then again in 87, he did Steel Dawn.
Oh, yeah, Jesus Christ.
I fucking love Steel Dawn, but for all the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah, it's not a great movie, put it that way.
And then he did Tiger Warsaw. I know of it. I've never seen it.
I've never seen it.
Then Roadhouse, so he's trying to get his character back. And then he did Next of Kin. So it's like, I don't know if he's trying to just keep like
one foot in the game. Like it's almost like he can't decide what he wants to be. Does he want to be a character actor, or does he want to be like a traditional movie star, or does he want to be an action star?
And then for the next 2 years, he completely changes and it becomes like Ghost. And Ghost is a massive hit. People love Ghost. And then he does Point Break. And then that's when you get the Patrick Swayze-ness of it. That's when fucking hell, Patrick Swayze is cool.
Well, that's the thing, though. I would argue that Point Break was the film that, like, pretty much captured exactly what he wanted to be. Like, that was, everything that this film maybe should have been. It's like, he has his moments to, like, do some proper acting. He's an interesting character, but he's also a badass. Like, he can still do the fight sequences and the action set pieces, but there's more to it than that. I'm sure some people would write off Point Break as a dumb action film. It's totally more than that. And a big part of that is Patrick Swayze, who I think is fantastic in this. And I think, like I said, he doesn't deserve to be Razzie nominated for this one. That's ludicrous. I just think, like the movie itself, its biggest issue is the fact that it's tonally caught in this halfway house between these two movies. And there is a way to do it. And Point Break is the perfect example where you can have your cake and eat it, where you can have both parts. This film, the action isn't quite good enough to pull that side off. And then on the other side, the narrative and the thematic of the film aren't quite as interesting as they should be. So it's almost like, in some respect, this is like a not as good Point Break, which seems a really weird thing to say about a movie about hillbillies and the mob. But you know what I mean? It's kind of like with Patrick Swayze's character. He's caught between the cops and the surfers kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like if you did this film really well, you could have ended up with something akin to Point Break, but instead it never quite sticks the landing. And that could be a big part of that could just be the fact that, let's be clear, Point Break has a much better director. And that's not me shitting on John Irvin. He's a perfectly okay director, but different quality there.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, should we move on?
Sorry, I just kind of drifted off then. Yes, I don't think I have anything else to add. Do you want to go to what's the next thing? Favorite scene?
Yeah, feel free.
Oh, well, I mean, it's easy for me. It's Big Liam shooting up Papa John's arcade / restaurant business. I still don't.
Did they call him Papa John in the film, or have you made that up? Because I didn't hear.
No. Joey called him Papa John like 17 times. To the point, I have to keep calling him Papa John because it made me actively uncomfortable in the film. Papa John. I was just like, why are you calling it? It's very familiar. I didn't like the fact that he called him Papa John, which is a strange way for me to react. I didn't like the use of Papa John, so I'm going to use exclusively the term Papa John for this entire podcast.
Papa John and Big Liam.
Big Liam, yeah, I do apologize for that. But it's like I said, I'm a little upset that he shut up the arcades. But it's a great sequence. I think, one of those moments where Liam Neeson's a proper movie star. I could also say the train sequence, which is, I think, the best action set piece in terms of stunts and everything else. But I'm going to go for Liam. Briar. Let's just call him Briar. Briar shooting up Papa John's arcades business.
And a film that's meant to be an action film, and you got the heroes and all that. My mind was the introduction of Kentucky, when the camera goes over the hills and
it's a cool transition that I mentioned it earlier, that transition from the kind of neo-noir Chicago where they've really gone heavy with the rain, and then it transitions to the Kentucky Appalachian Mountains, wherever the hell it is. And it is, like I said, in some ways it's kind of quite clumsy, but it does look cool. It does leave an impact.
I think it's great. I think it looks lovely. And then you got the way then they're being introduced, because he's a stranger again. I don't know how long, but he's never introduced his wife to his family or anything like that. So
yeah, they're a bit clumsy with all that, but I like the idea that, he was family, but he's almost been kind of like low-key disowned by moving to Chicago and living this. Yeah. Like, they haven't completely disowned him because they do welcome him back, but he knows that he's not part of the family like he used to be. It's another one of those things that is kind of there but doesn't really get dealt with. And I think that would have been, they should have leaned into that a bit more. But
because the kids don't remember him. When the kid shooting the bow and arrow is like, they said you were good with the bow and arrow. Were good and things like that.
Yeah. So, the only thing, of course, you just like, you see that sequence like, just in case it isn't clear, he's going to be using a bow and arrow later in this film for sure. Talk about clumsily foreshadowing something.
That was Chekhov's bow, if there ever was one.
Yeah. You can't have a bow and arrow in an action film and then it not to be used later in the film. Classic Chekhov's bow.
Yeah.
Cool.
That was mine.
Loves number one, probably the same for both. It is the cast. Other than the aforementioned Ben Stiller, the cast is absolutely fantastic. The non-traditional setting, and that's both, it's not the kind of traditional view of Chicago. Like most people, when they think of like Chicago films, I think, they think of downtown with like gangster films, or you think of like John Hughes films and you're off into the suburbs. This feels more like a kind of South Side Chicago film where you're away from the city, a little bit grimy. I liked all that. And then obviously the Southern Appalachian Mountains, which is a unique setting, as we already mentioned, outside of the horror genre. And number three, we've mentioned a bunch of times, hillbillies versus mobsters. I've got the same question you posited to me at the start of the podcast. Are there any other movies which have done mobsters versus hillbillies? And I don't think there has. And it's a really cool premise. So yeah, those are my loves.
We're pretty much the same. I had the cast as well. I had hillbillies versus mobsters. I think that's a great premise. I'd like to see some more of that. That's really good. Yeah. I mean, the only thing I think that it comes close is the TV series Justified, where you kind of have that, because they're in Kentucky as well and things like that. So, but yeah, hillbillies versus mobsters. And then, what was my third one? I did have it written down. Oh, the introduction at the beginning with, like I said, the rain, the neo-noir thing, the neo-noir, neo-noir. And then you get the hillbilly whisperer. He's the guy we call when we need a problem and things. And you get the introduction of Truman Gates. There is something that doesn't pay off, I don't think, as you go through. But I still think
the intro I thought was really promising. Like you said, that opening sequence, and like you said, I never really thought about it that way, but I like the idea that he's the hillbilly whisperer and stuff like that. And then cutting between the two locations, like, they've got like a really cool premise here. And then they never quite decide like you said, it's not they don't know what to do with it because they do the right things. They just don't really pick a side. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
and that's what they're trying to hint at. Him to pick a side. Is he going to go down the cop route, or is he going to go down the family
Family
route, the
roots. Yeah, yeah,
hillbilly?
yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
classic
But you all,
conflict. It's like on the one side he's got his kind of new life as a cop. He's got Helen Hunt, but on the other side he's got Briar and the expectations of his family. That's interesting stuff, but it doesn't really stick the landing.
because you don't feel it, do you? You don't feel that there is a conflict for him. You know, as soon as it starts, you know, well, he's gonna provide some hillbilly justice, or they wouldn't have this film.
Exactly,
So
yeah. And
yeah,
when like the hillbillies just random, like earlier in the film, there seems a big deal about getting them on board, and then you forget Briar's dead, and surely a lot of the family be like, "This is his fucking fault that Briar's dead as well." And but they all just show up and go full hillbilly at the end. It's
yeah.
strange. In terms of hates, I mentioned like warring families and approaches to honor and stuff. It's all interesting, but ultimately underplayed. We mentioned that as one of the big issues of the film. Ending feels particularly messy from a narrative standpoint, beyond the fact that it's this big, wild shoot down in a cemetery. I just don't feel the narrative threads kind of come together towards the end. I didn't really know what the deal was with Joey and Papa John and all that jazz. I didn't really care about anything. That was the big problem. And yeah, another, again, it comes back to the narrative issues. Swayze and Hunt relationship isn't as interesting as it should be. It's kind of set up at the start as being this big part of the film, and then it just kind of drifts off. And like you said, that conflict isn't really set up. It's just you get some ketchup thrown in her face. So he's a bit upset about it, but you don't feel that conflict of like, oh, am I choosing Chicago, the cops, and my wife, or am I choosing Briar? Blah, blah, blah. You have him hand over like the badge. And again, to bring it back to like, that what does it make me think of? It makes me think of Point Break. And you think of Point Break at the end when Keanu Reeves throws his fucking badge into the sea.
Yeah.
Oh, that's impactful as fuck. And it looks so cool. He's like, fuck this, I'm not being a cop anymore. Throws it into the sea, and all that conflict with him and Brody when he surfs off into the ocean to die. And you're like, fuck, man, this works on every level. And then in this film, he hands his badge over to the cop. And I just don't give a fuck. I just don't care. That's the problem.
And I'll go for mine then. I'll go on the don't give a fuck route. Kind of don't give a fuck about Gerald's death because there's not much with him. There's no connection between him and the brothers, Truman. There's that one introduction. There's no, even if there was just like a scene of family dinner or something like that, where then he's talking to Helen Hunt and
like Tombstone style, because he dies in Tombstone again. He's the quote. He's the quote unquote lesser brother. You see him and the rest of the cast in Tombstone. You're like, Bill Paxton's not making it to the end of this film, but he's in it enough that when he dies, what does it do? It creates a conflict between the brothers, but you also care about his death. In this, like you said, it's just, well, we'll kill him quickly just to get Liam Neeson and Patrick Swayze on the screen together, but we just don't care.
Yeah. My other one was, this might be a bit harsh. I didn't feel the brother thing then between Liam Neeson and Briar. Liam Neeson and Briar, they're the same guy. Between Briar and Truman. Right, like, you just don't feel it. They just feel like, I don't know, they were friends who then one of them moved. You didn't get the brother right up until towards the end. Then it starts to feel like
there's one great moment, and it's one of the best sequences they have together. Is they have the great bar fight, and it is a cool bar fight. We've got to mention when we're talking about the film where they're handcuffed together, and I like it. Almost reminded me of They Live. It doesn't go on as long as that, and it's not as good as the fight in They Live, but it feels like a proper brothers fight. Like they are going for it, and it's almost like, I want to hurt you, but I'm not going to kill you because we're brothers. So we're just trying to beat each other up a little bit. And the fact that they're handcuffed together makes it unique. And there's nothing showy about the fight. It's a real clumsy bar fight, and it's shot accordingly. And when they're in the car afterwards and they're reminiscing about when they were younger and chasing after other girls, they have this moment of like, oh, they do feel like brothers. Yeah. But it's so fleeting. And I'm like, the movie needed more of that.
But that's it. That's where I stood. Not for the fight, but I felt they were more like brothers on that car ride, but also randomly family when Helen Hunt tells him off. Look, you're family and you're welcome here, but if you get my husband into trouble, then fuck off.
Yeah, you're not
welcome.
Like
that all felt family and stuff. So
but that's the best part of the film. There's like a 30-minute spell, and it's got the best action set pieces. That's the bit where Liam goes to the arcade. That's the bit with the train sequence. You get the fight between Patrick Swayze and Liam Neeson in the bar. Like, again, for like 30, 40 minutes, I'm like, oh, this film's coming together. And then it's basically, we a bunch of films we've had this where like the best character dies too early. After Liam Neeson dies, the film kind of goes off the rails again and doesn't know what it wants to be. But there's a 30, 40-minute spell where it really comes together.
That's why I'm saying my second could be a bit harsh because I hated the fact that they didn't feel like brothers, but then halfway through they are brothers, and then it disappears. So it's
I totally understand. No, I totally understand that because we needed more of that throughout the film. That's the point. Yeah. Like you get this like little hint of what this film could or should have been, and then it's gone again before you know it.
And my third one is the mobsters didn't feel like an immediate threat. They 100%. Did not feel like a threat. I don't know what their job was. Didn't know, like, nobody really seemed scared of them. They just spent a lot of time in restaurants. They just, they didn't feel like a huge threat to me. So
you never get there. Well, one, it doesn't help that we don't know what they're doing. We don't know what their business is. We don't get a feel for their life in Chicago beyond the fact that they go to restaurants. They're just like a bit of a cliche. But as you said, like you think of the best mobster movies, you only need a scene. And I know Joey shot, Gerald, like, fair play. They're obviously a little bit dangerous, but you needed that additional scene where they do something which has nothing to do with the brothers or the hillbillies. It's just them being in Chicago, just being badasses or doing something kind of dangerous or threatening. But like you said, it never happens. It's just them kind of swanning about. They just almost as if they exist in their own little world. Like, why should we be scared of these guys? Like, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, they're my three anyway.
Cool. Any alternative titles for this film other than Next of Kin?
Yeah,
which they could really do with, because finding this film is surprisingly hard. Because if you type in Next of Kin, it just comes up with loads of things about Next of Kin. And then if you type in Next of Kin movie, it comes up with the 1982 film Next of Kin. So yeah, you really got to type in Next of Kin 1989.
I was getting a lot of Paranormal Activity Next of Kin when I was looking.
Oh yeah, that's the other one as well. Yeah. So yeah, surprisingly difficult to find this film.
Well, I mean, yeah, there are alternate titles. Whether or not they needed them, I don't know. So Argentina was The Winds of Justice.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Austria was Call for Retribution.
Yeah, but I'd probably take that over Next of Kin.
Brazil was Marked by Hate.
It's okay.
Bulgaria took on what Truman said about 50 times and said, "You've killed my brothers. I'm the last one." Bulgaria's is The Last of the Genus.
Jesus, that sounds like a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling that one.
Denmark, Thirst for Revenge.
Okay, sure.
Finland, Blood Brothers.
Can we... I'm waiting for, like, I don't know, fucking the former state of Yugoslavia to come up with Hillbillies versus Mobsters. That's the fucking one we're looking for. It doesn't exist,
dude. I was gutted. It's not on. Yeah. France was A Cop in Chicago.
Oh my God.
Germany.
Talk about burying the lead.
Germany, Call for Retribution.
Yeah. Pretty
Greece,
generic.
Family Revenge.
That sounds more like a kind of like I don't know, a family drama.
Hungary, Word of Blood.
Nope.
The next few are fantastic. Right. I'm going to go for my least favorite one of these three first, right? Lithuania, okay. Blood Relatives. All right. Italy, Cross-Sectional Revenge.
A big fan of that.
Japan. It's like a title. It's an album title. Japan, Patrick Swayze, Revenge is in My Heart.
That really is. That does sound like his, like, late, that kind of like Bruce Willis, where he started making music in the late 80s, early 90s. That feels like one of those. Bizarre.
Yeah.
But no, I'll go for the penultimate one there, I think.
Cross-Sectional Revenge.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to go for sure. Any facts for this film?
Mate, no, I haven't finished. They were
shit, sorry, mate. Sorry.
That's right. Portugal, The Clan's Revenge.
So you really did sneak this one. I was like, are there any alternative titles? Like, you kind of saw like there might be three. There's like every country in the world had a different title.
Romania, On the Trail of the Mafia.
No.
Sweden, Dirty Fighting.
Definitely not.
Yep. I made that sound like there was more after that. No, Sweden, Dirty Fighting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not getting the tone on these whatsoever. This will be an interesting one, facts, because as I said, nobody talks about this film. I'll be interested to see if there are basically any facts for this film.
Yeah, whether or not you class them as facts, I don't know. So the phone number Briar, played by Liam Neeson, gives to Harold, the hotel clerk, is an active number in Kentucky, so anybody could ring it.
Oh, fair enough.
Yep. This was the last film from Lorimer filmed Entertainment before going under.
Yeah, yeah. These aren't going to be the best facts, are they?
No.
No.
Patrick Swayze. Patrick Swayze says the same line in Ghost. They're coming for you, Willie.
That's like, see, I say that and then you drop that one. I was like, that's pretty fucking good. That is pretty good.
Liam Neeson plays Truman's older brother, Briar, but in real life, he is only 2 months and 11 days older than Patrick Swayze.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's around 1 hour and 22 minutes. You can see two of the patrons at the bar stealing a round of draft beer while the bartender is distracted by Briar demanding his shotgun. So Briar walks in, tells the bartender, I need a gun. And then two bartenders are like, fuck me, the bartender's not looking. Let's get some beer.
You can see it's clear as day. I was like, it must be like a choice because
was that a director's choice, or was it just
the
the extras thinking, let's get an extra drink in?
It looked like it was a choice because it was so clear that the shot was going down the bar and you can see, I think it's an old dude with a beer. He kind of puts his pint glass behind the thing and starts pouring a pint and stuff. I'm like, oh, fair play, they're going for it. It feels very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Purposeful? That's not right. You get what I mean.
Take this with a pinch of salt. It's like they pulled every name from the 80s bandwagon. Alec Baldwin, Robert De Niro, Michael Keaton, Ray Liotta, John Malkovich, Jack Nicholson, Sean Penn, Ron Perlman, and Tim Robbins were considered to play Joey Rossellini.
Jesus Christ.
If I turned around to you and said the mobsters were played by Tim Robbins and Ben Stiller.
I think I would prefer Tim Robbins to the thing is I could see Tim Robbins maybe just because Baldwin's like he's quite tall. Like, could I imagine Tim Robbins as playing Joey? I kind of could. Like, he's got the look. Like I said, are any of those stranger than Ben Stiller? Absolutely not. They're just fucking not. So yeah, I can imagine it being an interesting role. It's just I can only assume that Adam Baldwin was pretty low on that list. A lot of people, and that's no disrespect to Adam Baldwin, but you've just said a lot of much more famous people. Yeah. They have asked, and they've all just been like, "No, I'm not doing that," and they've ended up with what they've got.
Get ready for who was considered to play Truman Gates. Jesus Christ!
Oh, I bet you they had a massive list for this.
Michael Biehn, Jeff Bridges, Kevin Costner, Tom Cruise, Clint Eastwood, Harrison Ford, Richard Gere, Mel Gibson, Tommy Lee Jones, Chris Christopherson, Christopher Lambert, Dolph Lundgren, Dennis Quaid, Kurt Russell, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Bruce Willis.
The worst thing I can say about Patrick Swayze in this film is that he does feel oddly interchangeable. Like, I feel like you could have pretty much anyone on that list in that role, and it would be fun. Don't get me wrong, you can't have Schwarzenegger. You've got to change the role. You can't have Schwarzenegger from Kentucky. It just doesn't fucking work. But for the most part, excuse me, I feel like you could probably swap him out and it wouldn't make a big deal. There's only like that moment at the end of the film when he does that classic spinning Patrick Swayze kick. But other than that, I feel like he probably is a little bit interchangeable, sadly, in this film. In a way that, as I said, Liam Neeson simply is not. He is the star of this film.
I saw something the other day that made me laugh. You mentioned Schwarzenegger then. All of Schwarzenegger's films from the 90s are him playing a small-town American man, and we're just going to ignore the massive muscles and the Austrian accent.
Yeah, and he's always got names like fucking Joe Johnson or something like that. It's always like super American. It's like, at least with like Jean-Claude Van Damme, they usually give him a slightly European sounding second name to kind of explain the fact that, except for when he's Guile in Street Fighter, of course. But other than that, they usually go, okay, we'll give him a slightly kind of like, oh, well, he was born in Europe and he moved to America, whatever. Whereas with Schwarzenegger, they're just like, oh, no, this is just Ben Davis. Why don't I use Ben Davis, the Welsh fullback who plays for Spurs, of all the names? But you know what I mean. They give him very American-sounding names. Very strange.
Right. The next one, they've run out of facts for this, right? They must have, because this is fantastic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13. There's 23 facts on this, and these are the next 13. I'm going to read all 13 out. It's all right. It'll be quick.
Okay, go for it.
It's like they've run out of, like they had a quota.
Yeah. You need to get 25 facts for this film or whatever,
Kelly Blair's debut. Next fact, Andrina Belcher's debut. Celine Evans' debut. Jodie Pasquale's debut. Arlene Lensoni's debut. Mia Farrow's debut. John Ritchie's debut. Tina Engel's debut. Kimberly Cole's debut, star of Fugate's debut. Elizabeth Roof's debut. Kelly Goatee's debut. Marianne Burkhart's debut.
Fair play. I love the commitment to the bit that he went all the way through them. But it really does sell you on the idea that exactly that. Somebody being paid, say they've given him like 10 movies, and like, oh, we need 25 facts for these 10 movies. Like, yeah, no problem. He's got through 9 of them. And then the last one's next of kin. So what the fuck is next of kin? Looks up the cast. This will be easy. And as you said, after 7, he's like, uh-oh. I've got nothing, but I don't get paid unless I get 25 facts for all 10 movies. So you end up with this bullshit. But yeah, that is the true, like, you can't get phoning it in any more than that. Just listing, going so far down the cast list. Ridiculous.
Yeah, because that could be one fact. These were the ones that debuted in this film.
100%.
No. We're going to do it fucking single-handedly.
It's not even one fact. It doesn't, like, nobody cares about people who are like 23rd to 27th on the cast list.
Because none of those people have an IMDb. Like I said, Michael Bain and all them, and you can click the link on their name. All of those people I've said,
nothing. This was their first and only movie. It's like absolutely ridiculous. Next is Hug to the Future. So this is where we ask a question. Remake, sequel, Don't Touch or Let It Die. This is a weird one. Like, I would take a remake. I like the idea of the hillbillies versus the mobsters. But at the same time, is the premise that interesting? You could arguably let it die. What makes the film is the cast. But, see, I keep going back and forth. There's enough there where, you could make... Like, I'm always of the mindset, if you're going to do a remake, do it with films where you have a good idea, but it doesn't quite stick the landing. This is that film. There's an interesting movie there. It just never quite lands the plane. And it's just like, if you've gotten a decent cast again, went to the same premise, there's a decent remake there.
I would absolutely, from my Hug to the Future, I would make a remake, and I would, for me, and I'm going to throw in my making a change here as well, is you do a Crocodile Dundee style. You get to the point, or Crocodile Dundee 2 style. You get to the point where the mobsters, you cause so much trouble for the mobsters, they'll go to the lengths to find you, as in, they will hunt you down in your home turf of the Appalachian Mountains, not a cemetery. You then take it to your home turf.
Yeah, you could have like a proper, you could still have it, like you said, in Chicago, but the ending should have been like a Western style showdown. And this would be my twist on the film, is I would bring back Liam Neeson as Briar, but he would be like the patriarch of the family in this one. So on the one side, you're getting a big actor to play Papa Joey, and that would be like the big narrative. So in the middle, you've got whoever as, what's his name? I was going to say Colton again. It's not his name. Truman. And then either side of him, you've got Papa Joey, you get a big actor, and then on the other side is the patriarch of the hillbilly family, you get Liam Neeson. But of course, as we know, Liam Neeson he's still got his action chops. So instead of sending the young team, he's like, I'm head of the family, I'm going to take care of business. And he goes to Chicago, and he has to deal with Papa Joey and stuff. So that would be my twist. I love
how your remake as well has taken Papa John and Joey and just made him Papa Joey.
Oh, did I say Papa Joey? I do apologize.
3 times you've called him Papa Joey.
I think this would be a really interesting movie to recast. And I wish I'd thought of it before, because we could have done a whole section on it. But I think there's a really interesting recasting of this film. But as I said, I would still have Briar, Liam Neeson as Briar. I would just have him playing a slightly different member of the family, but ultimately doing the same thing. But yeah. I'll see. Now I do want a remake. I was having an hour. Now
I would pop him in. I'd pop them in the Appalachian Mountains, get the mobsters to come to your hometown.
Yeah. I think that'd be a great shout. Make a change. For me, as I said, I think you got to basically pick a side. I've leaned into the whole maybe make it a bit sillier. Like I said, have the car be a bit more kitted out. Give him the bow and arrow earlier in the film. Just make it a bit more of a fun 80s action movie. Just like I said, pick a side basically. But that's what I'd go for.
So I've already said, so for me, it would be, the ending would be in the Appalachian Mountains.
That's cool.
But also, I kind of want to sneak in, part of the same change is to make them more of a threat. Make the mobsters more of a threat. Let me know why people are meant to be scared of them, not just because they can eat in a restaurant and play video games.
Yeah, you could almost have like kind of stormtroopers versus Ewoks kind of thing towards the end, where it's like the mobsters roll into town, they've got all their machine guns and all that jazz, and of course all the hillbillies have got like bow and arrows and stuff. But
it gives the bow and arrows, the hatchets, the hunting dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes it more sense than them running through
a cemetery.
Yeah, you would have then a pit filled with snakes, an actual snake pit, not 100%.
Yeah, like they know they're coming, so they kind of like set out, kind of almost like Seven Samurai style. Yeah, that'd be fucking awesome. In terms of, is it video games next? I think it's video games. Let's go with.
I believe so.
Yeah, let's go with video games.
Yeah.
So for me, and this is a little bit lazy, but I was thinking about video games set in Chicago, and the one that immediately came to mind was Watch Dogs by Ubisoft.
Okay.
So I would basically get rid of all the tech crap in that film, give the character like a revolver, a bow and arrow, and a 1987 Chevrolet Camaro RS, and then split it between Chicago and Appalachia. So it's like you have two locations in the game. They're both open worlds, and you both have you've got to balance your life. So it's you've got to deal with the stuff in Chicago as a cop, and then you've got to go back to Appalachia. It's more kind of narrative based there, but you could still have the bits where the mobsters come and attack the town, and you've got to defend it and all that jazz. So I'd have an old school Ubisoft game. Like I said, I always thought Watch Dogs was one of those games that was really interesting on paper, but never quite worked out. And this is actually, if anything, the more I'm describing it, it's closer to, was it Sleeping Dogs is the game we both loved? The one set in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Basically that, but set in Chicago and Appalachia. But I've used Watch Dogs basically because it's set in Chicago. So I'll go with that.
For me, The Last of Us Part 2, specifically Ellie's part, where she's hunting, I think they are called the wolves in that. She's hunting them with the bow and arrow at the beginning. So you could take, you don't need it to be post-apocalyptic. You've got the high rises in that, you've got the streets and everything, and you've got the mobsters. So the gameplay of that, where you've got Ellie with the bow and arrow running through and things, I think that could be great gameplay. I'm going more gameplay route than anything when I think about this. So,
I've got a quote in my head, I have to have the car. There has to be. That's why I've kind of gone open world. So you've got I like the idea of you being able to be a cop, but then having that twist on it. So you have that kind of split, which is hinted at in the film but never dealt with. You have that properly in the video game where you've got your life in Chicago, but then you've also got your family in Kentucky. You've kind of got to go back and forth between the two.
Yeah, no, I mean, I
Let's combine the two.
I put that kind of gameplay in. Yeah, because it's a lot more gameplay than everything else. So yeah, I think we can make a decent game.
I think so. Scores and recommendations. This is a really easy one for me. This is a 3-star movie. I don't think I'd recommend it to anyone because as I said, it never quite sticks the landing. It's never quite good enough to say, if you didn't watch this growing up, that you have to watch it. But if you enjoyed it growing up, I suspect that you probably still enjoy it now. The only problem might be what you've already described, the fact that you remember it being more action-packed, and then you go back and go, this is probably a little bit slower than I remember. But watching it for the first time, it has loads of problems. But as I said, it's got a strong vibe to it, for lack of a better term, a great cast, good energy. I enjoyed it despite its faults. So 3 stars for me.
Yeah, it's a massive standout 3-star film. And in regards to recommendations, it's not one that you would stand out and recommend. Like I said, I remember it being more action-packed than it was, but that's by the by. It's one of those ones, isn't it? If you're a Patrick Swayze fan, you've probably seen this. Well, I say that, but you're a Patrick Swayze fan, and you haven't seen it.
I think this could have easily fallen by the wayside. And I mean, if you're a Liam Neeson fan or you're a Patrick Swayze fan, there's enough here for you to be give it a go. And I think if you just come with that caveat, listen, you don't have to see this. It's not going to fucking change your life. It's never going to be anyone's favorite film. But for an hour and 40 minutes, it's good enough fun.
Yeah. But there's other films on our list that you would recommend before this one. So,
100%. I'm going to say 3 stars and no, if I'm going to put my flag.
No, if we're going to nail it just to that question, it is a 3-star and it is a not recommend for me.
Yeah. So we're on the same page. Next week, you've got a couple of hints here to guess. This will usually give 3 hints to see if you can get it. So the year is 1987. It's not much there to work with.
No, we say that as the first one.
There's a real tricky one here. I could give you a really big hint, and I'm not sure if you get it, which would be exclusive to this, specific to this podcast.
Okay.
I'm going to give it to you. You have already mentioned this movie today.
What, today?
Today.
1987, I mentioned it today. Steel Dawn?
Nope.
Oh, because that was 87.
I'm going to give you another one, right? Yeah. Basically, the reason I'm picking this, and this had nothing to do with you picking this film, and obviously I didn't know that this film was set in Chicago.
Are you going to say Dirty Dancing?
No.
Okay.
The clue is, just this week, I booked a trip in August to go to Chicago. And because you picked this movie, I'm like, I'm going to turn this into an unofficial Chicago movie season. You said a movie earlier that is set in Chicago, and it was released in 1987.
The only thing I can think of, I don't remember saying it. It's not Ferris Bueller.
Nope.
No, because that was Chicago.
I'll give you one more. It's directed by Brian De Palma.
Fucking hell.
We even talked we didn't mention specifically about this film, but we mentioned an actor who's in this film and something which is very specific to that film as well.
I said Drop Zone. It's not Drop Zone. That was 90s.
Here's the last one. I know it's terrible. Like, I've been in this position where I'm like, I just can't get it. The primary star is Kevin Costner.
Untouchables.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, because you mentioned Sean Connery in his accent, and that's a big part of the conversation.
Yeah. And I mentioned the older one, Untouchables. Fucking hell.
Well, I was just like, because you, like I said, I booked to go to Chicago, and then just by chance, you picked a Chicago film. I was like, I'm going to go for another Chicago film, and the obvious one would be Ferris Bueller, because we still haven't done that yet. But bizarrely, it came up in conversation because the mum was like, "Oh, you can go visit the station where it's got the famous sequence with the pram going down the stairs." And for people who don't know, that's like a reference to, I think it's the film's from 1927, I think, Battleship Potemkin, which has the same sequence. So it was an homage to that, but obviously everyone just kind of associates it with the Untouchables now. But the Untouchables, it's not a perfect film, but another movie with an absolutely all-star cast, another film set in Chicago, very different film, dare I say, probably slightly better than Next of Kin, but a film I had a lot of love for when I was growing up, but I haven't seen for a while.
I'm going to do a Rob thing now of all the things I remember of The Untouchables. And you've said the cast and Connery. I remember Billy Drago as the man in white.
That is a very incredibly Rob thing to say. Of all, so many iconic things you can associate with The Untouchables, you've picked that. It was like your Baldwin moment earlier where you skipped Usual Suspects and went straight to made for TV movie with Dennis Rodman. Unfucking believable. So
Drago was the assassin, wasn't he? The man in white.
Honestly, I can't remember. I haven't seen this one for ages.
Oh well, yeah. He doesn't always wear white. He dresses as a cop and stuff like that. But I remember him being just fully dressed in white in one of the scenes.
Well, we'll find out next week. So yes, this has been Next of Kin. Next week in our unofficial Chicago season of movies, 1987's The Untouchables, directed by Brian De Palma. Anything else to have before we wrap this up?
No, for me, mate. Just had a really fun one as always. Looking forward to The Untouchables. I haven't seen it for a while.
Cool. I've been Liam. He has been Rob, and you have been listening to the Hey Guys podcast. Cheers, guys. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Hey, you guys!